When we talk about milk and dairy, often people, and this is the thing with plant-based nutrition, carnivore, whatever, I think the definition of actually what we eat, where you're getting your dairy from, because there's a huge difference, as we know. If you're getting that $1 of litre of milk from Coles versus if you're getting it from a farm that's been, fermented dairy, say for example, that's raw, that's been processed and it's high quality because it comes from a grass-fed animal, they're treated well. Huge difference in terms of nutritional content, and obviously people will argue calories a calorie, but there's going to be a huge difference in the outcome of that too in terms of someone's health. I mean, that dairy potentially that's been homogenized, pasteurized, comes from a sick animal. Not just that, but that dairy is coming from tens of thousands of different cows. It's not like, the farmer milks that one cow and that goes off and that's the dairy that you drink. No, all of the cow's milk gets funneled into the truck and gets pasteurized and processed at the same time. So you are potentially getting sick animals. That's why it has to be processed so heavily. And I was disappointed that there was no, hey, let's just define, because let's classify food. Like, what is food? My friend owns a farm, and we talk about this all the time, about the quality of fruit that comes from his farm. He gives me he brought in some peaches the other day, and oh my God, delicious. I've never tasted a peach from like that from the supermarket. Yeah. So I think in terms of the food quality, we really have to stop and go, right, let's define what we actually mean by milk. Let's define what we actually mean by dairy, rather than just be assumed that, in this epidemiological study and this research, well, everyone's having shit dairy to begin with. So really, is that what we're looking at? Because that's kind of accepting the status quo of our food's shit. Oh, well, let's just accept what the supermarket that they're giving us. And again, that's where the political aspect of what vegetarianism, veganism brings in, that I really, really appreciate.
Yeah, and I think to layer on top of that, it says a lot about where a lot of these studies are being done and where we're getting the information from. We're getting information from an unhealthy population. We're getting data from people who are eating or consuming the standard American diet or even the standard Australian diet, which not that long ago was recommending cornflakes for breakfast. We don't have this more relative comparison. And so when we look at these, and so it's fine to, you can listen to that debate and hear them argue their points back and forth, but you are right. It's like, well, we don't have this information that's relative to, a healthy population. And that's where I think a lot of that is very problematic. So I think that's where we all need to take a bit of a step back and go, well, where are we getting our data from? Where are we getting our information from? We're getting it from a sick population or an obesity epidemic, pandemic.
And I think the other thing that people need to stop and realize is that, because one of the points that has always been made about a vegan diet is that, or a vegetarian diet, it's a better diet. Like when research has shown that it's a great diet, it's healthier, it's who they're comparing it to, and they're always comparing it to the standard Australian diet. And the point that's always made it is, well, anything is better than the standard Australian diet. My point on that, well, if I have a choice of someone doing standard Australian diet or a vegetarian or plant-based diet, well, 100% I'm going to pick the plant-based diet because it's better. Now, for some people, that's maybe all they can afford. They can't afford meat. So you know what? That is actually a better option. Or their perspective is actually it's easier for me to stay healthy doing plant-based. Like same ways, some people in their perspective, it's easier for them to count calories than it is to cut out sugar. For some people, it's easier for them to go keto than it is to count calories. But what happens in nutrition so many times to say, why do these things work in mechanisms? Instead, it's like, well, you know what? This would actually suit you because of your perception and your personality. And that's what's not being done because it's so much of the mechanism of how it's been and the actual person of how you're constructed on an intellectual and personality level of preference and choices that, you know what? You really have, like for me, I don't like counting calories at all. So, doing an if a fit your macro plan is not going to work for me because I'm not going to bring out my scales everywhere I go. But,